discussing her upcoming book, her Boss Mama program, and how she helps other women of color rise to the top. Courageous in another way, by stepping out on your own and creating your whole Boss Mamas. And before we get into exactly what you do with Boss Mamas and your podcast and stuff, I want to see if you have any misconceptions about women in leadership roles that you kind of like to bust. And if not, that's okay.
One that I haven't mentioned yet is that we need to lead like men. Because if I ask you, think about a military leader. Mm-hmm. Think about a president of a country. Mm-hmm. Think about the leader of the church. Mm-hmm. Think about a top CEO. What do all those people have in common? Just the first face that pops up for you, Brianna.
Well, in church, I saw my priest, which is Father John. The first CEO is Bob Iger of Disney. I live in Florida, so Disney's a big thing. What's another one you said? Yeah, they all tend to be like white men.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it's so, even with us, like you and me, and we're like, we're all about women. We're like, think about men. Let's leaders. And thanks to Disney and these other media conglomerates, the stereotype continues. And also because the statistics back it up, that the majority of leaders are white males. And I bring this up because if we're about to bust a misconception, it's that, well, white males make better leaders. The white male style of leadership is the right way to lead. And when in actuality, women of color, we make great leaders because we naturally are, I believe in general, like relational. We are less about power and we want to share. We want to help each other. We believe in the whole person, not just like work people, but we want to have, all of ourselves show up, authenticity, vulnerability. I mean, I know I'm just leading into a general conception of women, but these are strengths and we can bring them also in with decisiveness and creativity and, risk taking. We do those things too. But this balanced style of leadership is really powerful. And if we can sync that with who we are naturally, like I'm aggressive on the tennis court. Great. Like, let's be aggressive with your business too. Like those are the same thing. And if we can see our strengths, bring them into our leadership style and lead authentically as us, that's where magic happens. Because then I see, wow, she looks like me. She leads differently. I can lead differently. She goes home to her kids and she talks about Declan, and she also writes and she talks about all her accomplishments. Well, then I can too. So it all is this like beautiful way of how authenticity, however that shows up, gives the rest of us permission and inspires us to like show up as ourselves. So that's why I really believe in this misconception, because if we see that it is a myth, then we can see that actually what it all takes is just showing up as ourselves. As uncomfortable as it is, show up.
I love that you said that. I'm so much about being authentic. And my husband's like, well, if you just did this, and great insight. Like, don't get me wrong. He's a sales lead, so he understands business and industry and stuff. And not what I'm trying to do, but and people will always give you advice. I don't know if you get this too. Oh, you should just do it this way. You should do your podcast like this. Your book should be like that. I'm like, but that's inorganic and inauthentic to who I am. And I would rather be hated for something from being who I am than loved for someone I'm not. That whole adage, like those cliches, but that's true. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, I agree with the ways of the world, or I agree with this, because I don't. So why should my business not reflect that? Like, I do believe that women are very capable. I do believe that we've been put on the shelf for a very long time. I do believe that we get the short end of the stick. Like, and my husband and I discuss this a lot, because of just how women handle things. Like, we're busy, my husband got on a plane to Africa, for work. God love him. And so I have to handle everything in the house for the next week, because that's easy to do, right? And plan a birthday party and get us all packed and ready to go to the in-laws for Easter and all the extra things. And you just take that just household management and extrapolate that out to, in my opinion, a business world. Well, we're used to managing multiple projects and, checking in, what's the traffic line? What's the timeline? What are we doing here? Like, how far along is this? How far along is that? And many of us are not only managing ourselves and our children, but we're checking in with our husband. Hey, did you get that done? Did you follow up with that? So tell me how we're not good leaders, because that's what we do every day. We're engineered that way. That's my soapbox.
That's true. I just want to highlight there's the mental load, and men just have no idea. They're just like, just tell me what to do. I'm like, what? Like, are you not thinking about it? There's so much. The doing is actually a lot less than all the carrying in my head about all the things.
Yeah.
So, so as part of the Boss Mamas program, I talk about how to shift load. And so if you have a partner or have someone you can ask help with, because not everyone does have a partner,
it's true.
Then how do you balance that load? And that load should include, Brianna, all the thinking, the planning, the what ifs, the scenarios, all of those things count toward this contribution to the household, which is not seen. It's invisible, yet important. So I'm glad you named that, because it's really important for us.
Super important. In a tangent, my husband and I are probably looking to move in like the next year or so. And I was like, I've planned the last 2 moves. I need a list. Like, I need a to-do list. I'm not creating the to-do list this time. And he just looked at me. I was like, I'm serious. I was like, if you want me to help you, I want a list. So just to like exactly what you're saying, you have to ask for it. So how did all of your experiences in business, in these different organizations, in the C-suite, military, how did you have this moment where you decided, I got to create this Boss Mama group?
I think it came out of personal need. I don't know if your style, Brown, is this way, but when I see a need, I'll go try to fill it. And if I don't find it, I will build it.
Ooh, I like that.
It's always been that way. And with Boss Mamas, I didn't see it. It's same with the book, actually, Brianna. I was looking for an Asian American book with role models for the kids. And I was like, what the hell is this? It's not that crazy a concept. And that's only a couple of years ago, they did not exist. So I created it. So a lot of this was, I want a space where you can talk about being a mother and a leader, and there's no shame. And you can talk about how you prioritize your family and yourself, and there's no shame. And we can talk about strategies, because that's how it always is, right? What do we want? Right. And then how do we go after it? It's possible. It's so damn taboo, right? This is during the pandemic. So there's so much sadness and death, and like, okay, maybe we should come back to ourselves and not feel so darn guilty that health and well-being and mental health and all these things matter. Like, why do they have to be bad? Why does it take a pandemic to help us realize that self-care is not selfish? Like, what is this? So came out of need. And I also just wanted a lot of high-powered women who, we're all in the struggle bus together. Like, how can we support each other? So both knowledge and community and action, all those together made that program work.
I like how you highlighted the mental health and just wellness in general. And what does that say about our culture, that it literally took the world shutting down and people dying like in mass, for us to reevaluate our priorities? What does that say about us? I just think that's very poignant as well. What is your ultimate goal with Boss Mamas?
I want women to know that they can have their all. So I want women to believe in themselves, figure out what it is they want, and then go after it, because it's time. Like our parents, our grandmothers, our mothers, they sacrificed a ton for us. It's time for us to have, impact, and like be a mother if we want to be a mother, but we should also have joy. We should have those things. We deserve it, period.
Yes, I love that. Damn it, you deserve it. You're allowed to be happy. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Like, how are you doing? Happy? I remember people would ask me that, and I was like, I'm happy. And they were like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm happy. It's nice to be happy. I know I don't use that word often, but I'm happy.
I love that, though. So you also have a podcast, and I believe it's called Rise Up.
Women of Color Rise.
Yeah, Women of Color Rise. Okay. I just always see your posts online. I'm like, keep thinking it's Rise Up. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast and the topics that you discuss?
Sure. So Women of Color Rise is for women of color who want to rise to the C-suite. And it's what I wish that I had growing up and trying to find people who looked like me. And it's really raw and honest about what beliefs and myths that we thought were true and ended up not being true. What are mistakes we made? What are sort of secrets that we learned eventually that really helped us rise in our career? And there's amazing themes in there. And we talked about some of them on this podcast, Brianna. Believing in yourselves, knowing that you're worthy to get a seat at the table, making sure you celebrate, share your accomplishments, building networks to support each other. And, you know, we know this, right? We read it in magazines. It's like top 5 tips. And you're like, yeah. But I think there's so much power to learning from people who come before us and seeing that we don't have to learn in such a painful way, right? We can learn from others and see that they're in the top seats. I know, honestly, I've learned that I could be a CEO because I had a CEO who I was like, I can be better than that. And that's one way. But how about seeing other women of color who are just like kicking ass at the top? And you're like, oh my gosh, if they can do it, I can too, right? There's both. Like, for white man, boss, and then the other side, like phenomenal women of color, women leading.
No, I think that's such a good point because there are so many good leaders out there that don't think get the recognition. Oh, and I just lost my other thought. Oh, as a kid, you know, I was the youngest of 3. You said you don't have to like go through all the hardships, right? Like we should learn by observing, right? I mean, that's how babies learn. That's how toddlers learn. They learn by watching and doing and tactile. And once in a while, you got to touch the thing to figure out how, you know, don't put your finger in the socket. Okay, I get that. But isn't it, I remember like watching my brother and sister do stuff and realizing I never was going to do that. Like I didn't have to do it to know that I wasn't going to do that. I didn't have to go out and do like, not that my brother and sister did drugs or anything, but I didn't have to go out and smoke weed and I didn't have to go out and play baseball. And I didn't, because I was like, I watched them do it. And I was like, that is not for me, you know? And I think that's so poignant because you don't have to go through all the hurdles. You can run on the straightaway, you know? It doesn't need to be hard to be worth it. And I want to ask you this because I think it's really important. Why is it important for you to help women of color rise to their fullest potential?
Because Brianna, I know you're white, but if you were to lead, like you would make the world a better place. And I believe you'd help other people have their voices be shared, that you'd invite joy and laughter, that you would make it just more fun and equitable. And that's what I believe about you. And so when I have more of you and also the color lead, I just think that we can infuse our unique ways of leading that are more open and that promote a sense of belonging and inclusion and help us all feel like we matter. Because that's what DEI is. They're like, oh, diversity, equity, inclusion. I think people are now getting like, okay, yeah, let's move on. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's, do you see people? Do you recognize their uniqueness, that they have something to give, offer, value? And that it's not about their work, but their innate humanness. And that when you implement that into the workplace, that their humanity allows you like great productivity and results. But it's not the results first, it's like the humanity first. So that's why I really believe in it. And I think the world would be, it's like I know it sounds so cliche, but like it would be just a better place, happier place.
I agree with that. I think that it's, I think sometimes there was a barrier because people were scared, you know what I mean? Or fearful. And then I also think that as we've kind of like started to like take apart some of these like boundaries and like pick apart like how they started, like for the longest time, like here in Florida, I didn't realize that there was like why the Crown Act passed and how it was like illegal for Black women to wear their hair in certain styles. I didn't know that, but obviously they did because they would be penalized for it. So just like learning these different nuances that you never had to experience, and just being like having them have a seat, having everybody have a seat at the table, because your experiences are gonna have you attack problems and find solutions in different ways. And isn't that what we're all trying to do, is, whether it's make a profit or a product or be creative, or like, we're all trying to get to a solution. So isn't it good to have different perspectives to find like a better way to achieve that goal? And how can you do that if everybody's cookie cutter?
Perspectives. Yeah. Like what better to have different minds with different thoughts to solve any problem. Mm-hmm. And it promotes more creativity and more inclusion and a better result. So absolutely. Diversity of people and diversity of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if everybody's the same, like, doesn't that get boring?
For sure.
Oh, I love highlighting this. There's like The Little Mermaid. I don't know if you ever watched like the sing-alongs, but there's like this Disney sing-along that I used to watch when I was a kid. And there's just one part, and she goes, it's called like, I forget the song is called, but it's not in like the main movie. It's like In Harmony. And she's like, if there was only one note, how boring life would be. Like, don't you need even like the dissonance and like the harmony to really make a song be so beautiful?
I love that.
Yeah. So every time I think about like, God, if everybody was like me, how awful would that be?
Yeah.
Like, it's so bland.
Right. Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents.
I think in addition to having all of the different types of people and perspectives, you have to value it, right? Otherwise you just have a mush pot. And that people say, okay, if you have diversity without the actual value on the people, then you have chaos. So be careful. You have to have both wanting diversity, but also valuing it. For real.
That's a good point. No, that makes absolute sense. You have a book coming out. I'm changing the topics just for a second. What was the inspiration for this Boss Mama book that you have?
Yeah, so I am working on a book about women of color and how they rise to the C-suite. And it's about cracking the concrete ceiling. And it's honestly, Brianna, it has so much to do with our talk today. I've talked with maybe at this point 60 women, mostly CEOs, women of color, and there are common themes. So can we, one, see the themes, and two, listen to these stories so that we can hopefully get the fast track, not to repeat some of these mistakes, and learn and be able to see that we can rise to the top. We can. It's so possible. That let's learn from each other rather than start from this like feeling of I'm all alone. What am I facing? Only me. It's like, no, it's a whole system, and you can overcome it, at least mentally, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to like put your mind over matter, right? Until how do I put it? I don't know if I can say it like politically correct or eloquently, but you're like chiseling away, right? And sooner or later, there's just going to be a hole where people can just go up instead of having to like consistently knock it down.
Yeah.
And there might be strides being made, but it's not there yet. There's no easy path. There's no fluid path. There's no systemically unprejudiced path, if you will, like there's still hurdles. So I get that. How does your book complement your podcast and the entire Boss Mama mindset?
So I would say that they're absolutely complementary. The stories that I've been able to learn from women of color, CEOs, are the story. I mean, it's mostly the bulk of the book, right? There's themes which the stories fit under, and so much of the Boss Mama's curriculum of self-worth and understanding the systems in which we live in, that fits in really well. So I love it because it's like I don't know if you feel this way about your work, but when you have a merging of your passion with your own personal life's experience, plus what you want to see in the world, it's amazing when those all three can come together. So I feel like that's what this is not because I intended it to be this, but because I naturally leaned in to the discomfort. Is this coming to fruition? So I think that we don't have to be so planned out. Like, what's the goal and how do I write it all out? Like, sometimes you can have do some thinking, right? But then take action and actually go after and see how it goes and pivot. But there's no need to keep thinking and staying in this like head of planning and perfection. Like, just go out there, try it and see what happens. So that's, I think, what happened with this book, and the hope that when it comes out, it'll be helpful to people.
That's awesome. Is there's one takeaway you would want women of color to get from your book that might be different than your podcast or even your Boss Mama group, or in your coaching? What would it be?
If it were one thing that was different, I would say, oh, we're both authors. Be the author of your own story. You're the heroine, and there are lots of dangers because good books have twists and turns and dangers and villains and those types of things. At the same time, you're the hero. So write your story, be the hero, and open up, because when there is a juicy problem or villain, it just makes for a juicy story. And keep envisioning as the hero of the story, or as, I know I'm not supposed to pull in like a podcast, but Barbara Rice, who is the CEO of New York Urban League, she said she has a mantra of I'm God's child. And so as God's child, who am I? How do I show up? And so in that same way, as the hero of your own story, who are you and how do you show up? Write that, get clear on it, and just live it.
But that's really good stuff. I love that. That's amazing. You can bring in whatever you want. This is your podcast. I'm just asking questions. Is there anything we didn't talk about, Boss Mama? Do you want to dive into any of the coaching aspects of your work?
Sure. So, I mean, here's the thing, and it doesn't have to be me as a coach, although, of course, I'm an executive coach. If you want to accelerate your career, your life, and you want it now, rather than, yes, read the books, yes, go to the conferences, yes, have your mentors. Those are all great resources. But if you really want someone who will push, hold you accountable, ask you hard questions, and get you moving to get that life as soon as possible, highly recommend getting a coach. I happen to specialize in women of color, diversity, equity, inclusions, leadership, motherhood, but find someone whose values aligned, someone who you listen to or read and their values resonate, because you want somebody who you feel connected to and that whatever they're sharing feels authentic, because you want to live your life. And often I think that coaches, it's an extension of I want people to be their best selves or happiest selves, what they already have, but sometimes mindsets hold them back. So my values do influence how we coach, that I do tend to be a kind of person who listens, but also will ask uncomfortable questions, and then also hold you to the mat to say, we're going to take action, and what happened if you don't. So find someone whose values aligned, works with you, but I highly recommend finding a coach.
That's awesome. I love that. So where can people find out about you, your coaching, Boss Mamas, and your podcast?
They can go to my website, which is analizawolf.com, or they can go to the podcast, which is called Women of Color Rise, or they can also just email me at analizawolf.com. Amazing.
Analiza, thank you so much. I love chatting with you today. This has been so incredible. I hope that anybody who's listening, if you can resonate with what Analiza is saying, reach out to her. She's got, and also as a side note, she's got incredible children's books that are all about different races, ethnicities, highlighting people of color who have been pioneers in our society, who might not get the attention that they deserve. So she's made that part of her ambition as well. You can check her out on the Random Acts of Reading podcast as well. And I know that I believe some of your books are linked to your website, correct? If I remember.
Yes, definitely, Brianna.
Yeah. So, because I know I've checked them out multiple times. So, and again, thank you so much for your time, Analiza. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective and your journey with us. And until next time, everybody, I hope you have fun learning things you didn't know you needed to know.